Hey guys, welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Andre Seegers, and this time we're joined by Derek Bender and special guest Ash Paulson from Game On to discuss all the new information and screenshots from Hyrule Warriors. So let's get started. Alright guys, so a whole bunch of news just came from Famitsu recently. Now since, we don't speak Japanese, or read Japanese even, a few people have actually gone ahead and translated the articles for us, including Heatman from Go Nintendo, and Streets Ahead on NeoGAF, and so there's some good information here. That I thought we'd just talk about. Nothing like really earth-shattering, but it does give us a little bit more of a heads up of what to expect, come E3. So we learned a little bit about the story, and that's the fact that Link is an in-training soldier, and he'll rescue Princess Zelda. Big surprise. Right. But the person that's kidnapped Zelda this time is a witch, being Shia, who's an evil character, or turned evil apparently somehow, though we don't know exactly how. So that's kind of interesting in that Ganon isn't here, at least yet. But we've seen numerous times before where, Ganon pops up later, and is the true final enemy.
I think, it's your basic setup. I mean, it sort of does fit into the whole idea that, this is a Zelda game, but it also, because Link's a soldier in training, it also has much more of a connection to the whole Dynasty Warrior series, where your person is usually in an army, so it makes sense that they're fighting alongside people, because, we've seen soldiers in the background during that first trailer, so Link is not fighting alone at all during this point. It's just that somehow or another he goes from an in-training warrior to being in charge of an army, and I guess that's where the interesting part's going to come from, is to see how he gets to that point. And they're suggested by this translation that Shia was turned evil at some point, so that does lead the possibility that Ganon might be involved in some way. So there's some threads here that could be very interesting, but it really is just wait and see at this point to see how it all comes together.
Yeah, one of the new screenshots even shows Link presumably in his, it looks like, in his knight form, and he doesn't have his tunic yet. So I'm guessing this is from pretty early in the game.
It seems like it, because, he seems like he's just got his sword or something to that effect, because it doesn't look like the Master Sword at all. It looks like just a very generic sword, but yet he has his Triforce is glowing on his hand. So it does indicate that he's been, chosen somehow. By what or who, it's hard to say exactly what, but I'm sure that once he gets chosen for this duty, then he gets the green tunic to sort of, maybe that signifies a leadership position, and then he goes from there.
And maybe it's at the point that he's, that he gains his leadership position that, the true enemy emerges. Maybe that's when we find out that Ganon's behind things, or at least we find out who turned Shia evil. I also find myself wondering if this is even going to be considered official canon by Nintendo, and if so, where it'll fit in the timeline. Because the timeline's just really interesting to me, so I'm curious to see if this will even be considered part of the official canon.
Yeah, where they could exactly place it is up for debate. I know a lot of people thought, because of Link's design, that it could take place before Skyward Sword, and during that same sort of era as the manga at the back of Hyrule Historia, which could make sense. I mean, I always imagine it was during some of the bigger wars that had taken place, but and unless she was a background element of one of those wars, it might this might be just something completely different, or it could be like an official pre-Skyward Sword setup for for the world. It's really hard to say. I have a feeling that it might be canon, because one of the other things that came from this is that AG Ayanuma is the one supervising this project. So I have a feeling he might actually make this canon in some way.
I guess the timeline thing is kind of weird, because we do have goblins here, suggesting a Skyward Sword, era game. But then we also have another image here, which is kind of interesting. It shows this, red villain, who we're presuming to be a villain, I'm guessing, who's just, surrounded by flames. Because as Jorley from NeoGAF pointed out, it actually seems like he's based on Volvagia from Ocarina of Time. You've got the flames, of course. He's wearing a hat or a skull, very similar to the shape of that same boss. And his hand, or whatever he's wearing on it, looks just like the claw from Volvagia again as well. So is that, Volvagia, reincarnated, perhaps? Or is there some other tie to him that I'm not thinking of?
Or maybe what Volvagia used to look like before you see him in Ocarina of Time. It could go either way, really.
Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense if we're assuming this takes place in the Skyward Sword era, which is pre-Ocarina of Time.
I actually had that same exact thought, Ash, where maybe for this game, I mean, it makes sense for a Dynasty Warriors-like game to be fighting other human enemies. I mean, we already saw that the Dongo is going to be in it, so maybe there'll be other bigger enemies.
Right.
But as far as Dynasty Warriors is concerned, it's always been just other like humans that you fight, and they're the bosses. They're just really, really strong and surrounded by all these enemies. So it makes sense to like have a villain in make him a human form. However, if this is the case and it is like a human form of Volvagia, that's kind of ingenious, because they could even just take like armor, like have these villains have armor sets based on some of the more iconic Zelda bosses over the years. And he's wearing that like ruby at his neck, so maybe the ruby gets destroyed and he becomes more monstrous and basically becomes a pawn or something like that. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of potential here for the story. It's just that we don't have really anything to go on yet.
Yeah, this could be a really cool way to bring it back, bosses from Zelda games, just in a completely different form. Now another character we see here is Shia herself. And this is where we can start to see, I think, the Team Ninja influence.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I went through the bosses of Zelda entirely just to see if maybe she was based on anything. As far as I can tell, she's not based on any specific character. So I'm guessing she's entirely new. So do you guys have any thoughts about her at all?
Well, like I said before, the first thing I thought of when I saw her was Varen from Oracle of Ages, but then I actually looked her up, and the two don't look alike at all. So The only thing they had in common was they're both witches. But yeah, she doesn't look similar to anything else that I can think of, and but like you said, there's definitely the Team Ninja influence in there, and but I guess they had to get that in there somewhere.
Beyond those, I do like the design of her. I mean, she has a very interesting style to her. I believe that even sort of matches, for lack of a better word, Volvagia's whole human design. So there is sort of a unique, not a unique, but a unifying element here with the villains, and I don't think we've had too many female villains in Zelda, other than Twin Rova and the Oracle of Ages and Seasons bosses or enemies. So I do kind of like that element, and I don't know, it's something unique, something different, and curious to see where they go with it.
Yeah, I noticed that she has the crescent moon motif on her breastplate there. So I don't know if that'll play into anything in terms of the motif of her attacks or anything like that, but there may be some sort of crescent moon type theme going on there.
So one thing we've learned is that this game's going to have a ton of characters, apparently. So much so that Enuma was surprised by the amount, again according to the translations. Although I kind of feel like he'd be surprised by any amount of characters more than one, seeing as he basically only plays Link in these games. Or in Zelda games, typically. But one of the things about Dynasty Warriors is that they have a huge cast of characters. I believe Dynasty Warriors 8 had about 77 characters. And so I'm wondering, like, playable characters, that is. And so I'm wondering, who else could they bring in for this game? We already know about, Link, of course, Impa, and I think maybe a few others you found in the analysis, Derek.
Well, I found Impa in the analysis, but there was another blue-haired character that some thought might be like Nehru or one of the other goddesses in her oracle form.
So who else could they draw upon?
Well, I mean, you've got the three goddesses, of course, and there's Zelda herself, and Impa we know is going to be playable. Unless you start drawing from other games and other timelines, I can't really think of too many more. But of course, if you want to go through each game, and if these are just going to be completely timeline independent and just for fun bonus characters, there you could go as far as Aghanim from A Link to the Past, or any of the sages from Ocarina of Time, or you could really draw Skull Kid from Majora's Mask. I mean, it just depends on how outlandish they want to be with it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking in terms of protagonists.
Right.
Like, could they do? Is that something they could do? Could you play as enemies or villains in this, or?
It all comes down to exactly how they set up the story, because I could sort of see them, like, let's say this is canon. I could see for the canon storyline only being able to play as Link and maybe Impa at times. And then once you beat the game, you unlock other modes, because one of the other things for Dynasty Warriors is that you can play as any one of the three armies, and that's how you unlock all the characters, because you have to play all three of these. So maybe as you play through the game, you unlock the ability to, like, like side stories or what if stories where you have these other characters from the other Zelda games pop in and be able to do something along those lines. I mean that's kind of my hope for it, because I think that'd be the most fun to do this sort of what if. I mean, I can play Link anytime, but this is a chance for me to try out some of these characters we've seen on the sidelines forever.
Right.
So yeah, let's get into that and see what we can do with them.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Definitely.
There's a lot of potential there.
Just throw them all in there. I said this in the analysis, but let's get, Ganondorf in all his forms. Let's get, Aghanim, Zant, Demise, just all these villains that we've seen over the years. And,
exactly.
All these other heroes like Ash said, so it'd be cool.
Now, beyond all that, we also learned about how the game's going to play. And, as we, expected, it plays like Dynasty Warriors, but with some Zelda elements layered on top. So they're adding things like Z targeting, which will allow you to, avoid attacks or easily target weak spots. The spin attack, that we saw in the trailer, is confirmed to be, a powerful, really powerful move in the game. That makes you invincible at the same time. Again, just like in Zelda 2. And then the weapons, and then we learned about the weapons too, in that you can change weapons, and that'll drastically change how the game plays. There's like one-handed swords that are meant for faster speed. And I'm guessing there'll be heavier weapons too that are more powerful but slower. And it looks like there'll even be a weapon upgrade system on top of whatever traits your character can gain as it gain presumably experience points, again like in Dynasty Warriors.
Well, we sort of saw hints of this in the trailer itself. We didn't actually see any heavy weapons in that trailer, but we did see Link use the fire rod in some pretty impressive ways.
Right.
So I did sort of see the whole idea of being able to change weapons coming, and the thing I noted for that one is he had no shield. He had no shield at the time, so it does seem to be a trade-off to find like your best style for the game. Like if you really want to go in there with just sword and shield, you can do that. If you want to play it really differently and have go around with the megaton hammer bashing enemies, you could do that maybe. And then of course the fire rod being able to do sort of more of an area of effect thing from what I could tell from the trailer. And I do like that customization, like the fact that you could fight any way you want, see what works best for you, and then just upgrade those weapons and your character and sort of go along that path. That makes it more of a unique experience based on how you want to play.
Well, and as we all know, it's pretty exciting because the Zelda series has no shortage of items to choose from over the years. And so, if we're talking about the Fire Rod and stuff like that, I mean, like Derek, he said, the Megaton Hammer, and there's so many more possibilities we could be looking at here, like the Ice Rod and Tornado Rod, and so many different things from across the series. Hook Shot, Claw Shot, I mean, who knows? And there's also something here about bombs, that the bombs will make an appearance, but not just for throwing at enemies. So I can't imagine there will be too much of an exploration element in this game, given that what it's based on. But it makes me wonder what else they could be used for, or what else the bombs could be used for.
Maybe they simply meant they can drop bombs too.
That's true. That would be really disappointing. But, yeah.
The only thing I can think of with the bombs is I have a hard time believing there might be puzzle elements in this game. I mean, there very well could be, but I'm going to say my gut feeling right now is probably no. But I could see them having secret areas where you bomb suspicious rocks, and you could find little treasure troves of items or health stuff or a new weapon or something like that, and to sort of give a hint of the Zelda exploration element.
Yeah, and we already know Hyrule Field is going to be in the game. Hyrule Field's famous for having tons of secrets, including ones that you blow up to reveal them. So I'd be surprised if that doesn't return here, particularly with this little tidbit here. In the first trailer, for instance, we see Link opening up a chest in either a dungeon or underground or something. It's possible that was a area he found by via the overworld that he detonated.
Another idea I had when you talked about that, and Ash was talking about all the different items you could get. I sort of had a thought back to his suggestion for what Link's final smash could be in Smash Brothers, where he said you could use the golden gauntlets to lift up these giant rocks and toss them at enemies. This is a perfect setting for that.
Oh, you're
it
right.
Really is. It really is. That's a good point.
Love to see them go crazy with the let's see some really powerful versions of these classic items.
I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, this really just allows them to go all out. Because a lot of the items before, although they had an offensive purpose, you usually only use them when you had to. Yeah, this is really the chance to open up what you can do with them. There's so much potential there, especially with how many items are available. Yeah, I can see them just going all out in the items you have available to him. Now, a few other things we learned about is the game will be playable at E3. which makes sense because it's about 70% done, and it's coming out in August in Japan, which I'm guessing a Western release would follow, shortly thereafter at the latest, sometime this year, basically. And we also learned that in Japan, at least, it's going to come in several different forms. You'll have the package version, which retails for the equivalent of $80, the download version at $70, and then there's a premium version at $115 that comes with a Triforce-shaped tabletop clock and apparently codes for special costumes. Now keep in mind, those are just the Japanese prices that probably be differently priced here. I don't think the core game will go over $80 by itself. But yeah, what do you guys think about all that?
I think probably the most interesting thing to take from this is the fact that it's going to be cheaper on the eShop.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really aggressive strategy to me. If people do prefer getting the digital versions, then right there you go, $10. I mean,
Yep.
I personally prefer a physical copy, so I'm perfectly willing to spend the $10 extra just to have that physical copy. And I mean, I kind of hope the premium box set comes along because, I don't know, a Triforce clock sounds pretty awesome. But overall, it seems like a pretty aggressive strategy, and I like what they're doing with it. So we'll have to see if they actually those same sort of sets come to the rest of the world.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I've really been wanting to see for a long time with digital releases. Is, I mean, you're not. I mean, the straight up truth is you're not getting a box. You're not getting sometimes a manual. You're not getting a physical disc. I mean, it should be cheaper, and I really liked that they're doing this with this game. Personally, I'm like you, Derek. I prefer physical copies myself, but I'm perfectly willing to spend the extra money for that. Given that. I definitely think it should be cheaper if you're not getting any of that stuff, and I love that they're doing that. And I think it's just really interesting to see, just with a Nintendo game in general. I know that Nintendo's not developing it, but how the premium set comes with codes for 6 special costumes. I mean, DLC like this is not something you generally associate with any of Nintendo's franchises. So
Right.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of costumes there are for Link. I mean, that's just not something I've ever really had to think about. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that is the most unusual thing here now that you mention it. So I wonder if could this be available maybe outside, for people who didn't buy the game as DLC? Like, do you think you'll be able to pay for those to buy separately, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, we know they've started embracing DLC with Mario Golf World Tour, so it's not impossible.
Okay, moving on. There's one screenshot here that shows off someone that looks kind of interesting. He actually resembles, I think you mentioned this, Ash, before the discussion. He actually looks a little bit like the Poe guy from Ocarina of Time that you would talk to and he would ask you to go find Poes. He's got like a single eye. But the reason I brought that up is because I'm wondering if he serves a similar role as he did in Ocarina of Time. Like, if you, assuming it's the same person, which it very well may not be, but what if there's like a Poe hunting mechanic in this game, which again would add to the exploration element, where you are actually actively seeking out different things in the environment, which I think it would be quite different. I don't think Dynasty Warriors had much of that, if at all.
Well, yeah, and I think that's really the main question going forward more than anything is just how much of this game is going to have an exploration element at all. I mean, from what we've seen, like you said, with the footage of Link opening the treasure chest, I mean, that's really the main question, is that there have been hints of that, but we don't really know how much, and that would be definitely a new thing for this kind of game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So do you guys have any final thoughts at all about anything Hyrule Warrior related that we haven't talked about yet?
Not too much. Just the saying, I'm looking forward to trying it out at E3. It's probably going to be one of the big games I want to get to, as well as Smash Brothers, of course. But I like where they're going with this. I'm really hopeful for the finished product. Mm-hmm. Very curious when it's actually going to release in the U.S. because I think September would be the best idea for it.
Yeah.
Because I think, let's say Smash Brothers comes out in November. I think you definitely don't want to release it the same month as that. I don't know. I think September would just be the best choice for it to just stay out of the way. Because it is Zelda, it should do well. But it's also a bit Dynasty Warriors, so you're not quite sure how this will do. Like, I haven't quite gauged the excitement level for this game.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be quite on the same level as the next mainstream Zelda title. I don't think that the excitement's quite there, but I think there'll definitely be some sort of anticipation for it. And September seems likely to me too. Maybe October, but then again, we don't know. There's some unknowns in there, like Yarn Yoshi. That might be an October release. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, November is out because of Smash Brothers. So September seems likely to me. I feel like they want to get this out as close to the Japanese release as possible.
Alright, well I think that wraps up our Hyrule Warriors discussion, so thanks guys for watching. If you like the discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, which you can find links to in the description below, so it's a good way to keep up to date with everything we post. And of course keep an eye on GameXplain.com for more on Hyrule Warriors and other things gaming too. Alright, thanks guys, bye.